The polished wood of Grandma's front door felt cool under my fingers. I could hear the party happening on the other side, a low hum of grown-up voices mixed with the clinking of glasses. It smelled like roasted chicken and the perfume my Aunt Carol always wore, the one that made my nose itch. I was wearing a new blue dress with a white collar that was a little too tight, and my black shoes were so shiny I could see my own wobbly reflection in them. My mom had pulled my hair back into a ponytail so tight it felt like my eyebrows were being tugged halfway up my forehead. She knelt in front of me, her hands gripping my shoulders. Her face was close to mine, and her eyes, which were the same color blue as my dress, looked sharp and worried. "Now, Sophie," she said, her voice a low whisper that was just for me. She smoothed the collar of my dress for the 10th time. "We've talked about this. You are going to be on your best behavior tonight. You are going to say please and thank you. You will not interrupt when someone is speaking, and you will keep your voice down. Is that clear?" I nodded, my head moving stiffly because of the tight ponytail. "Yes, Mommy." She wasn't done. She took a deep breath, and the smell of her minty gum washed over me. Her grip on my shoulders tightened just a little. "And you will sit nicely at the dinner table. No kicking your feet, no playing with your food, and absolutely no telling stories about things that nobody else finds interesting. We don't want a repeat of last time." My stomach did a little flip. Last time was Christmas at our house. I had gotten a new magic kit from Santa, and I was trying to show everyone the disappearing coin trick. The coin was supposed to go into a little red box, but my hands were clumsy and it slipped. It flew through the air and landed right in Uncle Robert's glass of red wine with a loud plop, splashing a few red drops onto his white shirt. He had laughed it off, saying it was a good trick, but Mom's smile was thin and her eyes were like ice. Later that night, after everyone had left, she told me I had a special talent for making a mess of everything. She said I was showing off and that nobody was impressed. I wasn't trying to show off, I was just excited. The memory made my cheeks feel hot. My mom looked past me, toward the door, as the laughter inside got louder for a moment. She stood up, pulling me up with her. She gave my dress one final, sharp tug downward. We were about to go in. My heart started to beat a little faster, a mix of excitement to see my cousins, and a cold dread that I would somehow do the wrong thing again. That's when she leaned down one last time, her lips almost touching my ear. The words she whispered were so quiet, they felt like a secret just for me, but they were heavier than any shout. "You'll embarrass us again, won't you?" It wasn't really a question. It was a statement, like she was telling me the sky was blue, or that my name was Sophie. It was something she already knew for sure. A knot formed in my throat. I wanted to say, "No, I won't. I'll be good, I promise." But the words wouldn't come out. It felt like she had already decided for me. I just looked at my shiny shoes and wished I could disappear into my wobbly reflection. My dad came up behind us then, putting a hand on my mom's back. He was already smiling, ready for the party. "Ready, you two?" he asked, his voice cheerful. My mom turned around, and the sharp, worried look on her face melted away into a bright smile for him. It was like she was wearing a mask. "Of course, darling," she said. She took my hand, her palm was a little sweaty, and with her other hand, she pushed open the door. The wall of sound and light hit us. The room was full of people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all talking and laughing. The big dining table was set with the fancy plates that only came out for special occasions. For a second, I forgot the heavy feeling in my chest. I saw my cousin, Ella, across the room, and she waved at me with a big grin. I started to smile back, but then I felt a squeeze on my hand. I looked up at my mom. She was still smiling her party smile, but she was looking down at me, and her eyes were sending a clear message. "Remember what I said." And just like that, the joy was gone, replaced by the cold, heavy weight of her words. I let my mom lead me into the crowded living room. My hand felt very small in hers. Dad went ahead of us, getting swallowed up by a group of uncles who slapped him on the back. My mom, however, kept me firmly by her side. She navigated through the clusters of grown-ups like a ship sailing through a rocky harbor, stopping every few feet to smile and say hello. "Sophie, say hello to your Aunt Carol," she'd say. And I would look up at a cloud of that itchy perfume and whisper, "Hello, Aunt Carol." "My, what a quiet little mouse you are today," Aunt Carol said, patting my head. Her long red fingernails looked like tiny claws. I didn't know if being a quiet mouse was a good thing or a bad thing, but my mom smiled and said, "She's learning her manners." It felt like she was talking about a puppy she was training, not me. We continued our slow journey across the room. I saw Ella again. She was hiding behind a big armchair, making a funny face at me. She crooked her finger, a secret signal for me to come and join her. My heart gave a little leap. Ella and I always had the best adventures at these family parties. We'd pretend we were spies, listening in on the grown-ups' boring conversations, or we'd sneak extra cookies from the kitchen when no one was looking. For a second, I forgot my promise. I started to pull my hand free from my mom's, ready to run and join the fun, but her grip was like iron. She didn't even look down at me. She was busy talking to another cousin, but she felt the tiny tug. Her fingers squeezed mine, a sharp, quick pressure that sent a jolt up my arm. It was a silent, powerful no. I stopped pulling immediately. I looked back over at Ella and her face fell when she saw I wasn't coming. She shrugged and disappeared behind the chair alone. A heavy blanket of disappointment fell over me. I wanted to be a spy. I didn't want to be a quiet little mouse. I stood there glued to my mom's side for what felt like an hour. The grown-up conversation buzzed over my head like a swarm of bees. They talked about things I didn't understand. Mortgages and promotions and someone named Linda who had gotten a terrible haircut. I tried to stay interested. I tried to look like a good, polite girl who was happy to be standing still. I focused on not swinging my legs. I clasped my hands behind my back and rocked back and forth on my shiny shoes. My grandma, whose house it was, finally came over. Her name was Anna, and she always smelled like cinnamon and bread. She had a soft, crinkly face, and her hugs felt like being wrapped in a warm blanket. "Sophie, my love," she said, her voice warm and happy. She opened her arms for a hug, and I automatically stepped forward, but my mom's hand held me back for a second. "Careful with Grandma Anna's dress, Sophie," my mom warned, her smile still painted on her face. I gave my grandma a stiff, careful hug, trying not to wrinkle her nice floral dress, but Grandma Anna didn't seem to care. She squeezed me tight. "Nonsense," she said to my mom, winking at me. "A dress is just a dress. A hug from my granddaughter is worth 1,000 dresses." She knelt down so her eyes were level with mine. "I heard you were the star of the show at Christmas," she said, her voice full of mischief. "Landed a coin right in your Uncle Robert's wine? That's better than any magician I've ever seen." My eyes went wide. I glanced at my mom. Her smile had become a thin, straight line. I expected Grandma to be mad, or at least disappointed, like Mom had been. But she was laughing. It was an accident," I mumbled, looking down at the carpet pattern. "The best tricks always are," Grandma said, tapping the end of my nose with her finger. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you your magic isn't real." She looked straight at my mom when she said it. For a moment, nobody spoke. The air felt tight and strange. My mom just gave a little laugh that didn't sound real and said, "Oh, Mother, you'll spoil her." Grandma Anna stood up. "Someone has to," she said, her voice still light, but her eyes were serious. Then she turned and announced that dinner was ready. A wave of relief washed over me. At least at the dinner table, I would have something to do other than just stand there. I wouldn't have to worry about running or playing. I just had to sit still and eat, and maybe, just maybe, I could do that right. Walking to the dining table felt like the whole party was watching me. My mom's hand was a firm, guiding pressure on my back. I felt like a little boat being steered into a harbor, and I hoped the harbor was safe. The table was long and white, gleaming under the light of the big chandelier that dripped with glass crystals, looking like frozen tears. My dad was already sitting at the far end, laughing at something my uncle said. My mom guided me to a spot on the side. "You'll sit here, Sophie," she said, pulling out a heavy wooden chair. Next to me. My heart sank a little. My assigned seat was directly between my mom and Aunt Carol. On the other side of the table, I could see Ella sitting between her mom and Grandma Anna. Ella was already giggling, trying to balance a spoon on her nose. Grandma Anna was pretending not to see, but the corner of her mouth was twitching in a smile. I felt a pang of jealousy so sharp it was like a stomachache. I wanted to be at that end of the table. The food was passed around in big, heavy dishes. Roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, bright green beans with little slivered almonds, and a boat of dark gravy. My stomach rumbled, but the hungry feeling was mixed with anxiety. My plate felt like a test I had to pass. My mom served me a small portion of everything. A perfect little scoop of potatoes, one piece of chicken, and a neat pile of green beans. "Now, use your knife and fork properly, Sophie," she murmured, her voice a low hum next to my ear. "Cut your food into small, manageable bites. And don't talk with your mouth full." I nodded, my eyes fixed on my plate. I picked up my knife and fork, which felt too big and heavy in my hands. I concentrated with all my might on cutting a tiny piece of chicken. The knife screeched against the porcelain plate, a sound that felt as loud as a fire alarm in my head. I froze, my cheeks burning. I glanced at my mom. She closed her eyes for a split second, a look of pure annoyance flashing across her face before being replaced by her polite party smile. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. The look was enough. I had already made a mistake. I ate in silence, my world shrinking to the circle of my plate. I cut my food into the tiniest pieces I could manage and chewed each bite 20 times, just like my mom had told me to once. I tried to be invisible, a quiet mouse eating her dinner. The conversation flowed around me. It was about politics and the weather, and someone's new car. I didn't understand most of it. Then, my Uncle Robert, the one whose wine I had decorated with a coin, looked at me from across the table. He had a kind face and a big, booming laugh. "Well, Sophie," he called out, his voice friendly, "your Grandma Anna tells me you're a real magic enthusiast. Are you working on any new tricks for us?" Every head at the table turned toward me. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the center of attention, a bright spotlight shining right on me. My heart started hammering against my ribs. My throat went dry. I had a story. I had a great story. Just last week, in science class, we had learned about caterpillars and how they turned into butterflies. Our teacher, Mrs. Davis, had called it nature's greatest magic trick. She had a jar in the classroom with a real chrysalis in it, and she said it could open any day now. I wanted to tell them about it. I wanted to explain how the caterpillar completely dissolves into a kind of goo before it becomes a butterfly. It was amazing, disgusting, and magical all at once. The words bubbled up inside me, desperate to get out. "I learned about—" I started, my voice a small, reedy squeak. I felt a sudden, cold pressure on my thigh. Under the table, my mom's hand had landed on my leg, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. It wasn't a gentle pat. It was a warning, a clamp. I stopped, the words dying in my mouth. I looked at her. She was smiling at Uncle Robert, a picture of pleasantness. "Oh, Robert, you know how kids are," she said with a light little laugh. "Their little stories can go on forever. We shouldn't bore everyone." She then turned to the person next to her and asked them about their garden, smoothly changing the subject. The spotlight moved away from me. Everyone turned back to their own conversations. It was like a switch had been flipped. The moment was over. Nobody had even noticed it, except me. I looked across the table at Grandma Anna. She was watching me, her brow furrowed in a slight frown. She had seen it. She knew. Our eyes met for a second, and in her look, I saw a flash of something that looked like anger, but it wasn't directed at me. It was for my mom. I looked down at my plate. The food, which had smelled so good just a few minutes ago, now looked gray and unappetizing. The knot in my throat was back, bigger and tighter than before. I took a tiny bite of mashed potatoes, but it felt like I was chewing on sand. I hadn't embarrassed them. I hadn't told my boring story. I had been a good, quiet girl. But I didn't feel good. I just felt empty. After what felt like an eternity, the dinner plates were cleared away. The grown-ups began to scrape their chairs back, the sound a welcome signal that the ordeal was over. A wave of relief washed through me. The intense focus of the dinner table was dissolving as people stretched and started to move back towards the living room for coffee and dessert. I thought, maybe now I can be free. My chance came a moment later. Ella, her face flushed with excitement, bounded over to me. She didn't seem to notice the invisible wall my mom had built around me. "We're going to play hide and seek in the garden before it gets too dark," she whispered, her eyes wide and sparkling with mischief. "Grandma said we could. Do you want to be on my team?" "Yes," I breathed, the word coming out with a rush of hope. Hide and seek in Grandma Anna's garden was the best. There were so many places to hide. Behind the big oak tree, inside the rickety old shed where Grandpa kept his tools, or flat on your stomach in the thick bushes that lined the fence. My mind was already racing, planning my strategy. I slid off my chair, my shiny shoes making no sound on the thick rug. Freedom was only a few steps away. I took one step, then another. "And where do you think you're going, young lady?" The voice, my mom's voice, was quiet and dangerously sweet. I froze, my back to her. I didn't have to see her face to know the look she would be wearing. I slowly turned around. She was standing with her arms crossed, one perfectly shaped eyebrow raised. "To play with Ella," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I glanced at Ella, who was looking back and forth between me and my mom, her happy expression slowly fading into confusion. "No, I don't think so," my mom said, her voice dropping even lower. You've had quite enough excitement for one evening. You will come and sit with me. Your Aunt Carol is about to show us the photographs from her trip to Italy. You'll like that, won't you?" Again, it wasn't a question. I looked past her, through the doorway into the garden, where two of my cousins were already running out into the twilight, their laughter echoing back. It felt like watching a movie of a life I wasn't allowed to live. "But Mom," I started. "Sophie, do not argue with me," she said. And the sweetness was completely gone now, replaced by cold, hard steel. "Come." Defeated, I shuffled over to the sofa in the living room. Ella gave me a small, sad wave before turning and running out to join the others. The heavy blanket of disappointment was back, heavier than ever. I was wedged onto the sofa between my mom and the cloud of Aunt Carol's perfume. A huge, heavy photo album was placed on the coffee table. For the next hour, I was trapped in Italy. I saw pictures of crumbling old buildings that all looked the same to me, photos of plates of food, and dozens of pictures of Aunt Carol smiling in front of things. My mom kept up a running commentary. "Oh, Carol, that's just beautiful. Look, Sophie, isn't that lovely? Look at the history." I just nodded, my eyes glazed over. I kept my hands folded in my lap. I could hear the shrieks and laughter from the garden. They were having fun. They were running and hiding and being children, and I was here, looking at pictures of rocks. To cope, I started playing a game inside my own head. I imagined I was a princess trapped in a castle, and my mom was the dragon guarding me. The boring pictures were a sleeping spell she was trying to cast on me, but I was too clever. I was secretly planning my escape. It was a silent, lonely game, but it was all I had. Then, a wonderful thing happened. Grandma Anna came in carrying a tray. On the tray was the most beautiful chocolate cake I had ever seen. It was dark and shiny, with little curls of chocolate all over the top. It was her famous cake, the one she only made for the most special of special occasions. "Cake time," she announced, and her voice cut through the dull haze in the room. My mom finally put the photo album down. Grandma Anna served everyone a slice. When she got to our sofa, she gave a piece to Aunt Carol, and then one to my mom. Then she turned to me. She leaned in close, and her cinnamon and bread smell chased away the itchy perfume. She handed me a plate, and I saw that my slice of cake was just a little bit bigger than everyone else's. She winked at me, a tiny secret movement. "A special piece for my special magician," she whispered, her voice so low it was like a secret just for the two of us. She put the plate in my hands, and her warm fingers brushed against mine for just a second. It was such a small thing, a slightly bigger piece of cake, a quiet whisper, but it felt like the sun coming out from behind the clouds. It was a message, a secret code that said, "I see you, the real you." A lump formed in my throat, but this time it wasn't a knot of sadness or fear. It was something else. Something warm and overwhelming. I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. My mom, of course, noticed. "Sophie, what is it now?" she hissed, her voice a sharp whisper right next to my ear. "Are you going to cry because you have too much cake? Don't be ridiculous." "No, Mommy," I whispered back, my voice thick with emotion I couldn't explain. I looked down at the cake on my lap. "It's perfect." And it was. I took a bite, and the rich, sweet chocolate melted in my mouth. It was the best cake I had ever eaten. It tasted of kindness. It tasted of a secret shared. And as I ate, I held on to that feeling like a precious treasure, a little piece of real magic that no one could take away from me. The party began to fade away. The mountain of coats on my grandma's bed reappeared as people started to get ready to leave. The loud hum of conversation softened into a series of goodbyes and promises to see each other soon. My dad was already by the door, shaking hands with my uncles. My mom stood up, smoothing her dress, and gave me the look. It was time to go. We went to find Grandma Anna to say goodbye. She was in the kitchen, packing up leftover cake into little boxes for people to take home. She looked up as we came in, and her crinkly smile returned. "Leaving so soon?" she asked. "It's getting late for Sophie," my mom said, placing a hand on my head. It wasn't a gentle, loving touch. It felt like she was checking my temperature or making sure I was still there. Grandma Anna wiped her hands on her apron and came over to me. She knelt down, ignoring my mom completely. "I have something for you," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial. She pressed a small, smooth gray stone into my palm. It wasn't a special stone, just a normal one from her garden, but it was cool and felt solid and real in my hand. "Every magician needs a magic stone," she whispered, "for focusing your power." I curled my fingers around it, the stone a secret weight in my hand. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered back, my heart feeling full again. "Now," she said, her eyes twinkling as she looked from me to my mother, who was tapping her foot impatiently. Before you go, Sophie, you started to tell Robert about a magic trick you learned in school, something about caterpillars. My breath caught in my chest. The story was still there, bubbling right under the surface. I glanced nervously at my mom. Her face was tightening, the party mask cracking. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. "Mother, it's late. We really must," she began. "Nonsense," Grandma Anna said, her voice cheerful but with an edge of steel I had never heard before. She didn't take her eyes off me. "I want to hear. A good story is the best way to end an evening. Tell me, Sophie. Tell me the magic." And so I did. I don't know where the courage came from. Maybe it was the magic stone in my hand, or the taste of the chocolate cake still lingering in my mouth. Or maybe it was just the look in my grandma's eyes, a look that said she truly wanted to listen. "My teacher, Mrs. Davis, she has this jar," I started, my voice a little shaky at first. "And inside, there was a chrysalis. And she said that it's nature's best magic trick. Because the caterpillar, it goes inside and it doesn't just grow wings. It turns into goo," I said the word with a thrill. "It melts. It becomes a soup, a bug soup. And then, out of the soup, it builds itself into a whole new thing, a butterfly, with wings and colors and everything. It dissolves and then it becomes beautiful. Isn't that the most magical, amazing, disgusting thing you've ever heard?" I finished, breathless, my eyes wide. I had said it all. The words tumbled out, maybe not in the right order, and maybe bug soup wasn't the scientific term, but it was my story, my magic. The kitchen was silent for a moment. I finally dared to look at my mom. Her face was a storm cloud. She looked furious, embarrassed. Her mouth opened, and I braced myself for the wave of anger that was sure to come. But Grandma Anna spoke first. "Wow," she said, her voice full of genuine wonder. "Bug soup. I've never thought of it that way. You're right, Sophie. That is magic. The very best kind." She squeezed my shoulder, and the warmth spread through my whole body, a shield against the icy glare coming from my mom. My mother said nothing. She just turned, her back rigid, and walked out of the kitchen. "Get your coat, Sophie," she called from the hallway, her voice clipped and cold. The car ride home was silent. It was a different kind of silence than the one at the dinner table. This was a heavy, angry silence. I sat in the back, the magic stone still clutched in my hand. My dad tried to start a conversation, saying what a nice time he had, but my mom's one-word answers quickly made him stop. I could see her face in the rearview mirror. Her jaw was clenched. I knew she was mad. I knew that I had, in her eyes, finally done it. I had embarrassed her. I had told a story about bug soup. But as I sat there in the dark car, a strange feeling settled over me. Her anger felt far away. It was like I was wrapped in a warm, protective bubble. The bubble was made of my grandma's hug, the taste of chocolate cake, and the solid weight of the stone in my hand. Her words, "You'll embarrass us again, won't you?" echoed in my mind. Maybe I had. But for the first time, it didn't feel like the worst thing in the world. Being seen, truly seen, for just a minute, felt so much better than being good. When we got home, I went straight to my room. I put the magic stone on the little table next to my bed. It looked ordinary in the lamplight, just a gray rock. But I knew it was special. I knew it held the power of being heard. I climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. I thought about the caterpillar, dissolving in the dark, alone. I wondered if it was scared, but then I thought about it breaking free, with new wings to fly in the sun, and I felt a little flicker of hope inside my own chest, a tiny spark of my own magic, waiting to be set free.